John 19:5-8. So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." When the chief priests and officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die, because he has made himself the Son of God." When Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. The powerful Roman governor, Pilate, afraid? Why? In this episode of 10-Minute Bible Study, wherein we are studying the Gospel of John in 10-minute, easily digestible bites, 5 times a week. So Pilate brings out the abused Jesus in front of the people, and the people call for his death. But notice who started the call for his death. The chief priests and officers were leading the cheer. I imagine them sprinkled among the crowd for that purpose, to motivate it. Not everybody in Jerusalem hated Jesus. Many people loved him. Some just wanted to see him. These guys were definitely the guys that hated Jesus the most. They'd have meetings, oftentimes, discussing how they were going to get rid of him. It seems to me that these guys were sort of astroturfing the whole situation. That's a modern term you might not have heard before, but astroturf, as you know, is fake grass. And to astroturf someone or a crowd or something is to make it seem like it's a grassroots movement, like real grass, that it just sprang up automatically. AstroTurf, of course, is fake grass, and so this was a fake grassroots movement that they started calling for Jesus' death. Pilate, rather petulantly, answers them, "Take him yourself and crucify him." They replied, "We have a law. According to that law, he ought to die." The law they're referring to is most probably Leviticus 24:16. "Whoever blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death." They're contending that Jesus blasphemed God by making himself out to be the Son of God. Now, for most part of his ministry, Jesus did not come out and say, "Hey, I'm the Son of God," and there's a good reason for that. If he needed to be around for 3 years to thoroughly train his disciples, and if he'd started saying that immediately to everybody, not only would they doubt that it was true, but by saying it, he would find himself already taken to the cross much earlier. Instead, Jesus, instead of telling everybody he was the Son of God all the time, he showed who he was by his word and deed. A couple of times when he was grilled by the religious authorities, he would actually state that he was and is God. And now they were using that against him to bring him to his end. So why did this make Pilate afraid when the Jews said this? It says he was even more afraid. Well, Pilate was a Roman, and Romans had their gods, and every Roman in his day had known stories about God who had appeared among men in human guise. Romans lived in fear of running into somebody like this. They lived in fear of offending some god in one way or another. And add to that, Pilate was also pretty impressed by Jesus. So he was thinking this might be true. Not the God that we know. He just thought it might be one of the Roman gods that he was messing with, and that scared him. There's another contributing factor that Matthew tells us about in his gospel. While Pilate was interviewing Jesus and dealing with him, she sent a note to him that said, "Please don't have anything to do with this man. I've suffered much in a dream about him." Now, the English author Dorothy Sayers had a radio play during the Second World War on the BBC, which was exceedingly popular. It was called "The Man Born to Be King." In her play, while Jesus is hanging on the cross, Pilate has a moment to be with his wife, and he asks her, "What was in this dream that you had that made you so very troubled?" And she said that In her dream, she heard a chorus of voices reciting, "He suffered under Pontius Pilate, crucified, dead, and buried," in languages all around the world. And so basically, Pilate made it into the Apostles' Creed, and his name is mentioned in churches all over the world, and that's what his wife was suffering about. Not necessarily true this is, but it is some good writing by Dorothy Sayre. John 19, 9-11. He entered his headquarters again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave no answer. So Pilate said to him, "You will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have the authority to release you and the authority to crucify you?" Jesus answered him, "You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." He asks Jesus where he's from, probably because he was bothered by the idea that he might be a son of one of the Roman gods. He had heard that he was from Nazareth, of course. So this question came to Pilate's mind because he was spooked by the idea that he might be messing with something other than just a man. Pilate reminds him that he has the authority to release or to crucify, implying that perhaps Jesus should be more compliant and forthcoming when he asks questions, because Pilate is saying, "Hey, I'm trying to help you," in not so many words, of course. Jesus then reminds Pilate, "You would have no authority over me unless it had been given to you from above." In other words, yes, Pilate, you have authority, but there is also a greater authority above you to whom you must report. So Pilate will be guilty of offending that higher authority, which he knows exists. That higher authority he knows exists, but who he does not know. But the one who handed Jesus over had the greater sin, says Jesus. Now, this is not a reference to Judas, but rather it's a reference to Caiaphas, who hatched the plot against Jesus with the words, "It's better that one die for the people, for the many." He of all people should have known better because the high priest, well schooled in the Word of God, knowing things about the Messiah. Does this mean, since he has the greater sin, that Pilate's sin is a lesser sin? That would seem to suggest that. Pilate didn't bear all the responsibility for Jesus' death, as Pilate is assuming that he does. He's saying, "Don't you realize?" He thought it all hinged on him. And in a way, Jesus was sort of simmering Pilate down and helping him to understand that it's not all his. It's not all on him. And in a way, he was sort of giving Pilate permission to lighten up a little bit, it would seem. Or not. We can't really go on and on about figuring out who was responsible for Jesus' death, because in reality, all of us sinners are. He would not have gone to the cross if it weren't for you and me and everybody else in the history of the world who have sinned. Nevertheless, after this exchange, Pilate became even more intent on releasing Jesus. John has, I think, really done a great job in showing us the humanity of Pilate. With all of its complexity, he's a real person with a conscience who was troubled by the authority that he had and the decisions that he had to make. This is not some made-up character. This is a real person struggling with the idea of putting someone to death.